You are the weirdos, mister.
Welcome back to the Final Ghouls of Horror. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Holly.
And I'm Elle.
We're three people who love horror and are coming at it from different perspectives of who we are, as well as very different levels of experience with the genre, which we're always excited to talk about. And this week, we're taking a look at John Carpenter's iconic 1982 sci-fi horror film, The Thing.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside. Where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
So let's get into it. Start off, what is your guys' history and or familiarity with this movie? Like, how aware of it did you know about the original film or the novella, the prequel, the original film? Holly, how much did you know about this going into it?
You had to start with me.
I had to start with you.
You had to start with me. Okay. So, rewatching The Thing unlocked some memories for me.
Exciting. I'm delighted to hear this.
There is a creature that haunted my childhood, haunted my nightmares, my every waking moment, and it was from The Thing. And I didn't even realize it until I rewatched it. And all sorts of memories were unlocked because I was like, I've seen this before. I know I've seen this before. How have I seen this before? So my mother used to always have the TV on in her room when she had like a sewing table in there and she'd be working on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a memory was unlocked of me sneaking in the room and ending up watching part of The Thing until I started screaming in horror and she realized I was in there.
How old was this?
This was after The Shining, I want to say. So 7 to 8 probably.
Oh my god.
So the creature, as I discovered, was actually, it was not the moment you would think, but it was actually the dog creature.
Mm-hmm.
When all the weird things were like coming off of it. I used to think that a creature like that would be walking like around the corner and attack me. We had a lake in the backyard and I used to have nightmares that it would like come out of the lake like for me in the middle of the night, to the point where it was a little difficult for me to make it through the movie after I realized this.
Oh, yeah.
Oof.
And it did lead to an amusing conversation with my father the other day, where I was trying to know if he knew anything about this. And I was like, I feel like I walked in on maybe mom watching this. And he was like, no, we were always so protective of what you watched. And I just stare at him and I said, Dad, mom showed me The Shining at age 7. And there's a really long pause and he goes, okay, so we weren't perfect parents, but who is? Like, yes. He's like, yeah, you probably did walk in. Your mom watched all sorts of weird things in there.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know about the other movies. I just know about this, The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this has awakened a lot of things for me, and I'm now terrified again. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
Wow. That's amazing, but also sorry.
In my defense, I did not know this when I suggested it.
Right.
I didn't know it until that scene came up, and I had to pause the movie, and it took me a while to continue the movie after that.
Yeah, fair. So, Elle, how about you? Did this unlock any core memories for you?
Yeah, there was this one time it came. No, I have heard of this movie through cultural osmosis
Mhm.
and one specific post on Tumblr that was like, imagine going to the cinemas and going, well, I mean, they could possibly come up with a better name than that. And then walking out going, no, damn, they got it right. That sure was a thing.
Yep.
That's what I got.
I mean, legit, that's fair. I've tried to think about it, and I am not sure when the first time I became aware of this is. I didn't watch it. This is a film that I think I knew about, like, growing up, like in mid 80s, late 80s, when it was kind of starting to get reappreciated. You know, it was big on TV, on VHS back in that era, to date myself. But I think that I saw this probably for the first time in my early 20s. Have loved it from the first time I saw it. And then from there, at the time, I didn't know about that it was based on a novella, that there was another film that is basically a remake. Didn't know any of that stuff. Have been obviously made aware of that over time. I remember I saw the prequel when it came out, and I have thoughts on that, and we'll get into that towards the end. But yeah, I have been aware of this for as long as I can remember, at the very least, and pretty much since the first time I saw it, have been a big fan. So let's run down the production history a bit. So the thing was directed by John Carpenter and written by Bill Lancaster, based on John W. Campbell's 1938 novella Who Goes There, which was previously adapted in 1951's The Thing from Another World, which is it's a film that has a very good reputation, but it also made several changes to this story. For example, in that version, the thing doesn't shapeshift. It's made out of plant matter. It's played by James Arness, who's probably best known for his role in Gunsmoke. And it's a little bit less about paranoia, the way that the 1982 film is, and is more about post World War II era skepticism about, like, that post nuclear thing of scientists shouldn't, there are certain things that are better left alone, and that's sort of explicitly played out within that film. Like I said, that film has always been very well regarded. So of course eventually remake discussions ended up happening, and development of the remake began in the late 1970s when David Foster and Lawrence Tiernan pitched a more faithful adaptation to Universal Pictures. Universal was interested. They picked up the rights, which was with, I believe, RKO. They were the studio. RKO didn't exist at that point, but they were the original studio that produced it. But they picked up the rights, and another example of one of our episodes tying into another episode we've done this early in our run. They originally tapped Toby Hooper and Kim Henkel of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame to write and direct. They didn't go with them because they were not a big fan of the pitch that they came up with. They went with him originally because he was under a multi film contract. So, like, we've already got this guy. But again, they weren't happy with the idea that they had. And the project was put on hold after several failed pitches until Alien became a hit. And then space and aliens and stuff like that was on the menu again. They went to John Carpenter, who at this point was a pretty bankable director. He was still considered like an indie director, but he had Halloween to his credit. He had The Fog to his credit, which was a hit. And he was initially actually uncertain about the movie because he didn't think Thing from Another World could be topped. But he was ultimately convinced to read the novella and found that the imitation aspect was fairly creepy, and he thought he could make it timely. The film was originally budgeted for $10 million, with 200,000, which was the most the studio had spent at that time on just the creature effects. That's not quite where it ended up. The effects budget alone ended up at $1.5 million with a total cost of 15 million. It was released in the US on June 25th, 1982. Notably, this film did not test particularly well originally because of the conclusion. The studio wanted a happier ending. There were multiple endings filmed. There was an alternate take in which McCready is rescued and is actually given a blood test to prove that he's not infected. Childs is not even in the final scene in that one. But after all the test screens and everything, Carpenter and one of the producers decided, no, we're going to go with the ambiguous ending. That didn't pay off. This film was not a hit. Grossed $19.6 million, again, against a $15 million budget. And you usually have to basically double your budget to make a profit. It is relevant to point out that it was just a bad release time. The thing opened 2 weeks after E.T., which, much more family friendly alien film. Obviously, that film did very well. It also released the same weekend as Blade Runner, so any chance that it was maybe going to get the adult sci fi fan crowd was squashed there. Critics did not like this film at the time. It was called, quote unquote, the quintessential moron movie of the 80s and instant junk by the New York Times. The LA Times called it bereft, despairing, and nihilistic. And that was just the icing on the cake. I think Carpenter mentioned that the thing that hurt him emotionally the worst was that the director of Thing from Another World and one of the actors were heavily not fans of it. It did find its audience on home video and TV and has largely since been reappraised as one of the best sci-fi horror films ever. Reviews are now overwhelmingly positive. I think it's at like an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. And everybody from Guillermo del Toro and J.J. Abrams to Quentin Tarantino have all cited it as influences. Couple quick fun facts. I guess this one isn't fun per se, but John Carpenter's career took a major hit after this. It lost him the directing gig on Firestarter, and Universal actually bought him out of the multi-film contract that he had signed. He did turn things around a little bit, fortunately, with Christine and They Live, and arguably Big Trouble in Little China. Great film, but that was also a box office failure. There is a famous theory that in the end you can tell who the thing is because cinematographer Dean Cundy said that he had put an eye gleam, this sort of illumination in the eyes of uninfected characters. And Childs doesn't have that at the end. However, that has been described as a technical issue and was not intended to explicitly state that. Carpenter says he knows who the thing is, but quote unquote, I cannot tell you. And finally, and this is the weirdest one to me, the film is watched annually in February to mark the beginning of winter at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, which would not be my choice if I was about to be trapped in with a bunch of people on an Antarctic research station for the next several months. That's just a recipe for disaster.
It just shows you the worst case scenario.
I mean, yeah, I guess it can only get better from here. So for the film itself and probably a bit of the discussion, there is a content warning, mostly about the film. There is a fair amount of animal violence in this, specifically the dogs. There is a whole fuck ton of body horror, a lot of gore, and pretty heavy paranoia. So, Elle, what exactly is this movie about?
I think it's a 1 hour 48.
Yep, that sounds about right. More specifically, what's the plot?
Yeah. So in Antarctica, we see a dog running through the snow pursued by a Norwegian helicopter. The dog manages to make it to an American research base while the Norwegian crewman accidentally blows up his helicopter and co pilot. In trying to talk to the American crew, he doesn't speak English, so is shot and killed because he starts firing on them. McCready, played by Kurt Russell, takes a pair of the crew to investigate the Norwegian base, where they find it in ruins. Inside, they also find signs of fighting and a block of ice with an empty cavity in it. As they make to leave, they find a pile of burnt bodies and one malformed one, which they bring back with them. Blake, one of the doctors, autopsies the mutated corpse, finding normal human organs inside, despite the appearance. The sled dog handler Clark kennels the dog from earlier with the others, where it morphs into a monster and starts attacking the other dogs. Alerted, everyone sees the creature before opening fire with guns and finally an actual full-on flamethrower. Video footage from the Norwegian base shows them finding something in the ice. Upon investigation, turns out to be a UFO. Nearby, a chunk of ice has been removed. suggesting that whatever was there had been frozen and reanimated. Blair runs a simulation on his computer that indicates a strong likelihood that one or more of the crew could already be assimilated by the alien, and that, if allowed out, would result in the end of humanity. Meanwhile, the corpse that they had autopsied earlier thaws and assimilates one of the crew, but is interrupted before the process is completed. It's subsequently destroyed along with the other bodies. With paranoia running wild, the doctor suggests a test using stored blood, only to find it all sabotaged. McCready assumes command as Blair destroys the helicopter, the vehicles, and the radio, stranding them there before being locked in the tool shed. Reckoning that because of the creature thawing out and its reanimation, that everything must hate heat, McCready holds everyone hostage at Dynamite Point before tying people up for a blood test. Clark tries to fight it, only to get shot in the head and killed. One by one, the blood reveals who is still human until one reacts violently, and another creature reveals itself by killing another crew member. Numbers dwindling, McCready leads the group, with Childs, played by Keith David, left to stand guard. They discover that the tool shed is empty, but a secret passage underneath where an assimilated Blair has been building a personal UFO to escape. The team explodes it before returning to the base, realizing that they're unlikely to survive the full winter. While setting dynamite and Molotovs, there's no sign of Childs. As now the remaining trio plant the explosives, the Blair creature attacks one of the others and lures the other away, leaving McCready alone. Before he can detonate the charges, though, the creature attacks, forcing him to set off a single stick of dynamite to start a chain reaction that tears through the base. Exhausted and freezing, McCready rests on some wreckage as Childs returns, claiming that he only left to follow Blair. Realizing that neither can fully trust the other, they share a drink as the fire burns and the cold sets in.
Just a happy, uplifting whole movie. So yeah,
Children's movie.
yeah, clearly a children's movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I laughed.
I will say, there are solidly funny moments in this, but I think those moments it's the dry humor, but more specifically, other than being obviously very lighthearted, and I'm totally joking,
Family friendly.
family friendly,
Apparently.
this film digs deep into some pretty hefty topics. Things like paranoia, isolation, infection, so on. So, Holly, what themes in this did you see? What themes resonated with you? How do you think about how this movie sort of explored that stuff?
Well, like my childhood monster coming back to find me.
Like your childhood monster coming
Yeah.
back to find you, exactly.
That resonated with me a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
It's my new favorite story about someone's experience watching this.
I mean, I have a similar story for a different movie if we ever get to it.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think another thing that did get to me, it is a good movie. Because I'm going to have a lot of negative things on it. Before I have all my negative stuff, it is a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, it was really hard for me to get through. It was very uncomfortable for me for multiple reasons. The isolation, I'm not a fan of that. I'm terrified of isolation and abandonment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's legit.
I'm a naturally paranoid person, so I would be the first one probably with a gun shooting other people down at the base.
You would be Blair.
Yeah, my future does not look bright up there.
Yeah, that's fair. Elle, how about you? What did you find in this film in terms of like what it's trying to say and that kind of stuff that spoke to you?
I didn't really connect with it like that. Like, obviously, it's there to recognize, but I'm going to be a little bit depressive and just say, oh, the paranoia and isolation, I just get that in real life day to day, that I'm always left alone and I think everyone hates me. Like, just bring down the tone a bit more, but...
Yeah, I'd like to interject and say that you are loved here.
Right.
I think, if anything, it reinforced my dislike of animals, especially dogs. Like, I've never really gotten on with dogs. I don't know why, but turns out I am mildly allergic to them, so that's probably something.
That probably has something to do with it.
But yeah, it's just like, I don't know, maybe I was watching this movie too passively, which is a
No,
possibility.
I think that's fair, and obviously every movie's going to hit people differently. Clearly, I think for my part, there's a ton of stuff that I could talk about in terms of like the thematic aspects. I mean, again, this movie, if you look at it in the time that it was made, this was made in 1982. We're talking about a movie that is basically about how paranoia can destroy an otherwise tight knit group. And we look at the fact that this movie was made in a time when America was sort of stuck in the Cold War and was really kind of psychically shattered from the events of the Vietnam War. I would say when you look at the characters here, you could argue that most of these characters are at least seem to be. I mean, we're not doing clinical diagnoses, uh, especially since none of us are qualified to do that. But you could argue that most of these characters seem to be suffering from perhaps some sort of PTSD or at least symptoms of it, and they're all pretty broken in different ways. At the same time, I think, and this is what hit me, it's pretty relevant in terms of how currently we are just sort of inundated by a mistrust of each other. And like, I don't want to center it too much in the 2020s, but this is a film about an unidentifiable infection spreading among a group of colleagues that results in isolation, paranoia, finger pointing, and the complete breakdown of community. Which I guess what I'm saying is this film hits in a whole new way post 2020. Like, this is a COVID film made 32 years before COVID, basically. And I really, really noticed that this time around. Some of the other things I think that I personally pick up from it, I latch onto the Lovecraftian vibe or the cosmic horror vibes. I kind of prefer to say because that sounds less racist. But I know I'm not the first person to mention this, but you have a film about this indescribable threat from the stars that insinuates itself into this small community. This is a threat that doesn't really care about us and really only needs humanity as a co-opting mechanism. And that's all extremely cosmic horror. And the only other thing I want to mention as far as the themes, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the queer reading here. We have an all male and very masculine crew who start to sort of lose trust in each other over the fear of being different or being infected. When you consider how queer rights were on the rise in the late 80s, it's easy to read this film as a movie about the quote unquote gay panic. The once they know that the things among them, everybody's warned, don't be alone with any single person because it needs that sort of privacy to make a move on you. And the blood test scene is a whole other thing. I'm not saying that this movie was intended to be an AIDS allegory. It wasn't. AIDS didn't come into public light until right around when the film was released. It was obviously already a thing, but it didn't become really publicly known and wasn't identified as such until after. But if you look at it from a modern context, the blood test that outs the infected as different and a threat, the way that the bodies of the infected ultimately break down, you pair that with the paranoia, it's kind of weirdly prescient in that respect. So all of these things sort of hit me when I watch this movie. And I think it does a fairly good job of hitting all of those beats.
It's funny because, like, exactly as you mentioned it, I happened to be looking it up, like the history of virology, just to get
Mhm.
an idea if there was anything specifically that might be indicative. 1952 was the peak of polio.
Mhm.
In the 60s, Epstein Barr was going around. They'd been discovered then. At 1983 was the first isolation of now known as HIV,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing like depending on how long the movie took to make, nothing specifically was pointed out. It's like, oh, there was the Spanish influenza of like 1918. It's like, well,
Right.
that's a bit early.
Yeah.
But yeah, just out of curiosity to see if there was anything that's like, oh, well, we either saw a massive spike or the cure was developed. Because I'm thinking like smallpox and things like that.
Right. I don't think Carpenter was really as interested in the virology and infection aspects
Hmm.
and more how the film was playing in the sort of paranoia. And again, I think in his mind it was probably mostly the Cold War themes and how that paranoid mindset can quickly, from a, I would say, emotional or spiritual aspect, infect and destroy a community.
Yeah, I just like having the parallels if there's some available.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it does. Again, I think it's really strangely prescient about a lot of stuff unintentionally, but hey, it works and it kind of speaks how timeless the movie is in that respect. But yeah, so with this movie, I mean, there's a lot of set pieces and the like, but there's not a heavy amount of locations. So we're pretty much cooped up with these characters from start to finish. And I'm interested what you guys think about the characters and sort of the dynamic between them. Holly, how did the characters come off to you? Anybody specifically who popped, I guess would be the right word for you? Were there characters that you identified with? Hopefully not, because they're all pretty terrible. Terrible is probably not the right word, but like our biggest hero in this movie is a raging alcoholic. Like,
It took me a while to warm up to a lot of the characters. The one character I did like from the beginning was Childs,
hmm
and it took me most of the movie. And honestly, I didn't even know until I looked it up that that was Keith David.
right.
But like after I looked it up, I'm like, yes, the voice. I know the voice.
hmm
Um,
Yep.
but yeah, so he was my favorite. I was rooting for him. I didn't really like Kurt Russell's character.
Yeah.
I don't. He just kind of got to me throughout it to the point where I may have been hoping for a slow death for him, but
I mean, we don't exactly have the most endearing start to him as he loses a chess game to a computer and then pours booze in it to break it and calls it a cheating bitch. Like,
yeah, he's not exactly the final girl type that you're rooting for through the film.
no, not at all.
But yeah, honestly, for a while, a lot of the characters sort of blurred together for me until all the deaths started happening.
hmm Which that makes sense because it's not like we have really big extended backs. Let me rephrase that. It's not like we have backstories for any of them.
Yeah, we don't really know a lot about them.
No.
And that is a complaint of mine. I would have liked to know a bit more about at least a few of them. Like, where do you come from? You have a family back home. You know, why are you here? But we didn't really get any of that stuff.
I mean, would that have been possible without invoking the tropes? Considering like it's 82, so there's
Mm,
this type of thing doesn't exist, but it's like, oh yeah, no, I've got a girl back home, and they've got a kid on the way. It's like, oh, you're for sure dead,
Right.
200% dead. You're dead already.
it would have given them a little more to relate to, though. Because going into it, I don't care about these guys. They can all die for all I care.
hmm
But that's just my opinion.
and that is absolutely fair, and I get that. I would say for me, I don't think they need backstories because that encourages us to think about who they are outside of this community. And it's the community that they have, which is, I would argue, a little bit tenuous, but it's definitely there. Like, you feel that sort of dynamic between them. They're all fulfilling archetypes. Like, personally, I don't mind, for example, that all we know of Copper is he's the doctor. We know Clark because he's the dog guy. We know Palmer as the conspiracy theorist guy. That stuff doesn't bother me. I absolutely get why it does some people. But with these characters, the guys I would consider to be, lack of a better way to put it, the supporting roles, I think there's just enough to them. And honestly, the actors are all doing enough to elevate the characters, specifically at least through how they relate to everybody else, that it works for me. I would agree they are very thin characters. And that is definitely something to have where there's a valid complaint to be had there. It just doesn't bother me personally. Elle, how about you?
And this, uh, except for, I guess, personally attacking me for not wanting to get changed in front of them, was my high school locker room.
Yeah.
It's like I could pull out my school yearbook or with like the photos and go, all right, that's this character, that's this one, that's this, and just have the whole cast.
Hmm.
Not that I went to school with Kurt Russell and Keith David, but that I went to school with people who were epitomes of their characterization, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
Because it's like I don't think that would have been quite the ongoings in the women's locker room, but of course I wouldn't know because I wasn't part of the group that decided to invade.
You do not want to be in a women's locker room.
I'm sure at some point we will cover Carrie.
Yeah, no, it's everyone for themselves. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's awful.
Yep.
But yeah, so it is very on theme for, like, even as thin as the characters are, the way that they interplay, it's like, oh yeah, no, that was, I'm in high school again. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think I do like McCready more than I think you do, Holly. But then again, I always hate saying I like unlikable characters, but I do like unlikable characters. I do like complex characters. And I think, don't get me wrong, McCready is an asshole and is, I mean, he is sort of the typical masculine macho kind of character, that stock character are almost. But there are a couple scenes that really elevate to him, from which we'll get into very shortly. I do think it is my appreciation for the actors that helps a lot with this. Like, it is hard for me not to feel some kind of connection to Blair because it's Wilford fucking Brimley.
Yeah, maybe that's a question that I had because, like, I've heard the name, but it's
Hmm.
like I don't know if I've seen him in anything. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's just that cultural gap that, because Australia.
Right. I mean, he was working pretty regularly from late 60s, early 70s. Granted, I think most of the most iconic stuff came after The Thing, so this is a little bit anachronistic, but movies like Cocoon and roles like, I think he was in one of the Ewok movies, the TV movies. I think probably what most people recognize him from is a TV series called Our House, which I think was mid 80s. That sounds about right. But yeah, he had just sort of a demeanor of playing these wiser, more comforting presences, I guess.
I could buy that.
Yeah, weirdly, the more that I think about it, well, my mind immediately, when I think Wilford Brimley, goes to Cocoon and this. When I try to think of specific roles that he was in, the actual roles, not just this movie, it would be The Thing, and it was one of the Grisham movies. It's the one with The Firm, but he plays a fixer for a corrupt law firm. So while I think of him in these older, wiser, sort of heartwarming, I guess, roles would be the way I would for it. The roles that really stick out in my mind are the more ominous or villainous ones.
Okay, so there is a chance that I could have seen him in things, but have not had the personal opportunity to.
Correct. So, moving on from the characters a little bit, specific scenes. What are the scenes? I mean, Holly, I feel like we already know one of them.
Yep, yep.
But what scenes in particular stand out to you that don't involve terrifying possession and mutation of dogs?
Weird doggy with the tentacle. Yeah. That one stood out.
Uh
Uh
huh.
okay, the beginning stood out for like the wrong reason. I think it just the beginning for me, like it was so much snow.
Mm hmm.
And I it didn't really set the movie well for me. Like when we were talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and we were talking
Mm hmm.
about how everything felt so gritty and there's so many scenes of the desert and it just sets the mood. I see what they were going for at the beginning, but I think it's hard to set the mood showing just like 5 solid minutes of snow because there's nothing there.
I mean,
And I know that can be argued that this is a bleak movie and
right.
but it wasn't working for me.
I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I definitely see where it wasn't working for you. It's gonna be one of the ones that I mentioned of one of the scenes I love.
Yeah.
And again, it's gonna work differently for different people, and that's fine. And I totally get, yeah, like if you're coming into this and you're thinking this is gonna be sci-fi horror, and we're looking at gorgeous cinematography, but still just snowscapes. I get why that's gonna be off-putting, I guess would be the right way. Yeah, it's not necessarily gonna work quite as well. Elle, how about you? What scenes in particular stood out to you?
It's a little bit understated considering everything else, but when they're exploring the Norwegian base,
Mhm.
before they find the basically the coffin,
Right.
just that feeling of, oh, there is history here, like even immediate history, in that it's still all frozen over and desolate.
Yep. There's little things that definitely tell a story.
Mm. And
Axe in the wall.
yeah, I like that sort of environmental storytelling things like in games and everything.
Yes.
So that was like, ooh, I like that. Because I don't know, everything else is just like in service to the movie.
Mhm.
Whereas that it's like that didn't technically need to be all there. You could have achieved the same thing much quicker, but going to that sort of effort, it's like, oh, good, yes, good choice.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for me, I mean, look, there's a few obvious scenes that stand out. The big effects and the big spectacle heavy scenes are obvious standouts, and obviously the ones that I think my brain goes to as first. But there are two scenes in particular that I think are really effective. Again, the opening scene. And, well, again, I absolutely get why it doesn't work. For me, I feel like it starts off with a real sense of foreboding. So, we're looking at this landscape. We're hearing this very ominous synth music, which, by the way, comes from Ennio Morricone, who is one of the all-time great composers. Did stuff for Untouchables, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Mission Number, a number of films. This synth music really sets the scene for me because it's this sort of just foreboding, almost like a heartbeat kind of sound to it. And then we see this helicopter making its way across, and then we see the dog running. And for me, this is a key moment because, A, you immediately know something's up. Like, why are we following this dog? And then it leads into fairly quickly the Norwegians trying to shoot it. And of course that leads into the scene where they end up killed. For me, and this is something that registers on a rewatch, or at least registered to me on a rewatch, is how well that scene is put together in terms of the subtle storytelling. Because that dog is not trying to escape from the Norwegians. It's luring them in. Because the first time we see the dog, it runs up, it stops, it turns around, it looks to make sure that they are still following him. and then it turns around and keeps running. Once we've seen the whole film and we see the plot, to me, that reads as that dog, there were two survivors that could tell people what happened, and it was trying to get rid of evidence or witnesses to what happened, knowing that one way there it might not know that there's another research station out here because it's an alien creature. It doesn't necessarily know that. I don't know, maybe it did, maybe it does learn it, which is something that we'll get to in the prequel, but it does know that if it lures them away from the safety of their base, they're probably not going to make it back, and that is very careful storytelling that I enjoy. The other scene that I really love is, and it is again, it is a smaller scene, and I think this is one that really gets me behind McCready. It's the tape recorder scene because it's a nice bit from a story perspective. This movie has to do a lot of exposition, right? This is a way where it makes sense, where it's not necessarily one character talking to another. He's making this recording to leave a record in case the thing kills them all. And we get to learn a little bit of exposition about the clothes, which will come to play later against McCready, but still. But it's an important scene to me because Kurt Russell really gets to show a different layer to his performance. And it has my favorite line from the movie, which is, nobody trusts anyone anymore, and we're all very tired. Because that's basically the movie's thesis. And again, that is the 2020s in a nutshell right now. Sadly, like, nobody trusts anyone anymore, and we're all very tired, is kind of my day to day life.
Yep. I did have one other scene that kind of stood out to me, but I guess for the wrong reasons. Whereas I feel if they hadn't included it, it would have made me buy into the movie more.
Okay.
Right at the opening, before we even get to the dog in the helicopter, it shows the like a UFO going and crash landing essentially.
Mm-hmm.
If they hadn't included that and it was just this suspense and horror movie without it being explicitly from the start, oh, it's aliens, I think, like, yeah, I think I would have bought in a bit more. Just going, where is this heading? Rather than going, oh, well, yeah, it's an alien attack movie. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'll be honest, even having seen it a few days ago, I completely forgot that that scene existed. But I can absolutely see that. It makes it a little bit more ambiguous if you didn't include it. I'll be honest, to me, that feels like a studio note scene.
It's like, oh, well, we have to have this because of the test audience.
Yeah, or not even the test audience, but execs saying, "Well, if this doesn't happen, how do we know it's an? How are people going to know it's an alien? Never mind the fact that we find out it's an alien because of the big ass spaceship. Like, we need people not to be confused right away, which doesn't feel like a John Carpenter thing because again, this is a guy who deliberately chose the most ambiguous ending. So, yeah, I can see how that scene undercuts it a little bit. It doesn't really for me, but that might be because I forget that it exists every time.
Yeah, like, this is the first time I've ever watched it,
Right.
and that immediately took the legs out from it.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh yeah, I know in the back of my mind from just pop culture that it is an alien movie.
Right.
That is that suspension of disbelief, I guess.
Mm-hmm. No, legit. So I mean, you cannot talk about this movie without talking about the effects work. I think this would be a good little movie without the special effects. Like it'd be a suspenseful little sci-fi horror pot boiler.
It would be an episode of Doctor Who.
It would be an episode of Doctor Who, or it would be an episode of The Outer Limits or Twilight Zone or something like that. But the effects are, well, not the only good thing about it, definitely are what makes it iconic. How do they work for you guys? Al, how well does the effects work play?
I don't know if it landed properly.
Really?
Because when you see the one that they recovered from like the burn pit and it's like the two-headed,
Right.
it's like that looks a little bit too fake. And this is with me trying to buy in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other ones being in motion made it stand out a bit better.
Okay.
And
Fair enough.
yeah, so I mean, I it's weird to say that I think they did too much with it.
Like too much in terms of
Like in terms of the the level that they were going to with like each transformation basically is like, okay, you could turn the sort of body horror factor down from a 10 to like an 8 and it's still really good, but having it at that 10 is just like a okay, yeah, it's a little bit much.
Interesting.
They looked very good though.
Right.
Like the effects have definitely aged well,
Yes, I will definitely agree with that.
which I think is a credit to having practical effects in your movie. People figure it out. It's not hard. AI can get in the bin.
Yes, for sure. I think no, the practical effects are definitely a big discussion point. That and CGI is often fantastic when it's used correctly, but if you can do it practically, do it practically. It's always going to be the better option.
Yeah, don't make Ian McKellen cry by having to act against like 12 green circles. That's just sad.
I don't know why the first thing I went to was Cats, because he's done plenty of green screen stuff before. That's a whole different kind of horror movie, though. But yeah, Holly, how about you? How do the special effects? How did they play? I assume the dog was pretty effective.
I mean, on a small child, absolutely. But no, as an adult though, I found the effects very good, especially for their time, and absolutely horrifying.
Right.
I mean, the rest of the movie terrified me pretty well, especially the sorry, it's so hard to describe this. The the thing coming out of the guy with the two heads and then like
The defibrillator scene is how I call it.
thank you. Yes. And then well, in particular the head like scuttling away on spider legs.
Uh-huh.
That's the stuff of nightmares right there.
And that is legitimately for me, like it's horrifying and don't get me wrong, it is phenomenal like effects work. You can see where the money went for the money for that time.
Right.
But it's also for me the funniest moment of the movie. Not the effects, but I want to say it's Palmer's reaction where they all just turn around and he goes,
Yeah.
"You've gotta be fucking kidding me."
Yes. This reaction.
Which, I mean, legit.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. It, for me, those add, I mean, the dog scene is gooey and gross. It's very tactile. It's horrifying because it's happening. Well, it's horrifying to anybody who has a connection with dogs, less so, because it's very brutal violence towards these poor dogs, or the effects work representative of these dogs. This is not Cannibal Holocaust. They did not actually brutalize animals for it.
It's not the beloved children's film Milo and Otis, where they went through several pairs of cat and dog during the filming. I think they ended up with 6, and they ended up killing them all
What they do to the animals?
filming.
Yeah, there's a whole story. Milo and Otis, I want to say it was filmed in Japan.
It was a Japanese film that got cut up and redubbed, as people like to do with Japanese stuff. See Power Rangers.
Right. And the best of my knowledge, it was not filmed under, how to best to put it, it was not filmed under the usual guardrails and protections that you would get from a major American studio film.
Or even a proper Japanese film.
Or even a proper Japanese film. Correct. This is not because it was Japan. This is because it was, to the best of my knowledge, a small, very small outside of the Japanese film system production. And I could be wrong about a lot of this. This is just simply my memory of how it played out. But yes, they were trying to get these animals to do things to fit their story, and they were abusive to the animals. It's fucked up.
That's yeah, no, that's awful.
But yes, that did not happen in this film. As
Good.
far as we know, those dogs were treated very, very, very well. But in terms of the effect stuff, we've got the chest defibrillator scene, we've got the dog scene, we've got the ending scene, not the end scene, but the final scene with the thing where it becomes this sort of bigger monstrosity. And then I guess in a more, it's still an overt effect. And to me, it's a single, like, spectacle-wise scary moment in the film is the blood test because
Oh,
it's,
yeah. And then, like, the poor guys that are still tied up.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Although I would say in that particular scene, I think Palmer's transformation is the one thing that doesn't age super well. It looks very visibly like a dummy that is mutating and blood popping out and the eyes and stuff, but it's fine. Like, it doesn't look bad.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I think the pure horror of that scene, though,
Uh-huh.
it worked. The reactions of everyone else in the room is what I was
Yep.
watching in that
Yep.
scene, rather than those effects. So I think that worked. That's what sold it.
To me, the single scare moment is when the thing pops out of the blood.
Yes.
Because you're watching everybody's reactions, you're waiting for it. There is it's the conversation that you're listening to, and notably there's no musical sting to alert you that this is the moment you're supposed to be scared by.
Not even like the build up, like just the riser.
Yeah, it is. I don't think there's a score under that scene. I may be wrong, but I don't think there is. It's just him doing the test, going to each person, the hostility between them, which is done well enough that you're absorbed in it. So I think every time I watch it, I don't even pay attention to the fact that he's applied it, the coil, and then it just pops out, and then it goes ape shit from there.
Yeah. I was thinking throughout the film, like with the special effects, what would it look like today? Because these special effects were really good, in my opinion. And I was just wondering with today's technology, what that would look like.
I'll tell you what it would look like. It would be CGI'd up, and it would look like 2011's prequel.
So not as good.
Not as good. I don't think, like, I was going to talk about this prequel a little bit in the last bit, but I will say I don't want to go too deep into the prequel, but it is a perfectly fine film that they made a couple very drastic mistakes in. For reference for people, the prequel is literally just what happens at the Norwegian base. It explains everything that we saw in that scene, which I don't think we needed explained. We don't need to know why the axe there. We don't need to know why the man is frozen in the seat having his wrist. But it's not bad. The biggest problem was they did practical effects, and then the studio was like, "But CG," and then they CGI'd over all the practical effects,
Mm,
which is never good.
no, that loses a lot.
Yep. I will say this about the 82 film. The fact that this movie was not even nominated for Best Visual Effects is a fucking crime.
Well, it's like you said, it was going up against ET
Okay,
and Blade Runner.
this is probably part of the inherent grudge that I have against ET. I have not seen ET in probably 20, 25 years, probably longer than that.
I haven't seen it in a while, though. I'm probably going to show it to the kids at some point soon. So,
It's one of those movies that I have to see. I'm going to sit down and watch eventually because I do not have a good impression of ET. I don't know how much of that is the fault of the movie itself because I saw it, I saw it growing up. I seem to remember enjoying it. And then I think the next time I saw it was probably in my really early 20s, when I was starting to get into other film stuff. And it came off as too kiddie to me, to 20-year-old edgy emo me at the time. And then add in the fact that it resulted in the thing getting fucked in terms of visual effects. It's not just the ET's fault. Blade Runner and Poltergeist were also nominated. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy both of those movies.
yeah.
Neither of them hold a candle to the effects work here.
One of those is on my most hated movies list.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'm trying to
But
remember
that's
what.
because you had to watch it.
Blade Runner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, English class.
Because you had to watch it in English class cut up in pieces, which
Yeah, on repeat for 3 months.
that would make me hate almost any film too. Yeah.
I was just going to add, whenever I think of ET, I'm reminded of a podcaster's review on Letterboxd about it. One thing that surprised me was how much I want ET, the alien, to die by my hand. He's a wet yuck fella that I can't stop thinking about beating to death with a shovel. I think that would be unreal.
I don't hate it that much.
That
Wow.
was a 4-star review.
Random fun fact: family friend of mine was in ET and
Oh,
actually had a
really?
small speaking role. Yes, yes, he
Hmm.
can be. He's one of the guys towards the end chasing after the boys, and he's got a
Mm-hmm.
couple of lines, and you can see him like right at. He is the guy like right at the front when they take off on their bikes.
Nice.
So
Very cool.
just fun fact there.
Yes. But yeah, I have had this bad impression towards ET for years. But yeah, I'm gonna need to watch that movie at some point to give
But
it another chance.
kids,
So
yeah,
before we leave the special effects section,
Yes.
I have one complaint that is actually advice as well because of the defibrillator scene.
Mm-hmm.
Ostensibly, that man's heart has stopped. You do not need to shock for that. That is when you do chest compressions.
That is fair.
that may have been
Using a
even more horrifying if he was doing chest compressions.
Yep.
using a defibrillator is only for when the heart is arrhythmic, so it's not stopped. Chest compressions are what restarts the heart in some cases. And current health advice is that it's 100 chest compressions a minute, not the 1, 2, 3 check.
Good to know.
So I thought that worth mentioning because that bothered me so irrationally in that scene. It's like, no, chest compressions. What are you doing? You are going to kill that man further. You will
I mean, it
double
was
kill
the
that
80s.
corpse.
It's fine. He paid for his bad decisions. And see, for me, a defibrillator is what you use to kill bad guys.
Yeah, or wake someone up from a coma, as in the case of Mr. Bean.
I mean, yeah, fair.
You throw them on your back, you turn it on, electrocute yourself, launch yourself across the room, and land on the coma patient. That wakes them up.
Every
Amazing.
time.
You secretly charge it while the villain is monologuing, and then you wait for the opportune moment to throw out a witty clear, and then you shock them with it. That is the only valid use for a defibrillator. That is not the only valid use for a defibrillator. But yeah,
But yeah, my family would disown me if I didn't bring that up. Because
legit. No, that's fair.
my mother was a nurse and my sister is currently a serving ambulance officer.
Yeah, yep.
God, the amount of horror stories I had to put up with as a
I
kid.
can imagine.
There's a reason I don't like diving boards.
Is this the point where you terrify us with another horrify us with another story?
If you would like, because it's not great.
I feel like there's a reason I don't like diving boards is not something that we can let lie.
Story time with Al. More nightmare fuel.
So the story that I heard was that a woman who was about 8 months pregnant
Oh fuck.
Oh, please. Oh, okay. No, continue.
decided to try a diving board and ended up with a belly flop.
Oh
And the
no.
difference in water pressure uh, acted like a cesarean. They did close the pool
Jesus.
though.
I would hope so.
Were mother and child okay?
To the best of my knowledge, the mother was okay.
Child was not.
I did not hear about it because of government restrictions on the health status of a child.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yep.
fair.
I assume fine because otherwise telling me this story is even more fucked up.
Yeah, no, legit.
Also, like, I'm sorry, if I'm 8 months pregnant, I'm not going on a diving board.
Yeah.
No.
Like, even before this story, I mean, you're not really supposed to. You're supposed to do light activity in the water, not jump into a pool.
It was the high dive. So
I'm sorry, what?
there were 2 diving boards before going to the high dive.
So there were mistakes made here.
Several.
I'm speechless. What? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, great.
So let's cheer it up a bit with
I don't know how I don't know how this is the one that drives me speechless compared to Giraffe in a Van and everything else, but it is. So yeah, let's just move on from that.
Well, then the giraffe in the van took her to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Let's bring it back to some happy wholesomeness and talk about the ending.
And talk about the ending of this movie.
Huh.
So, like I said in sort of the production history, this film, there were a number of endings filmed, a number that were written as well. The studio wanted something far less ambiguous, and John Carpenter, in his John Carpenter way, said, "Nope, here's what you get." This is why I love John Carpenter. What do you guys think of the ending? Like, I don't think it matters which of them is infected because I don't think that's the point of the film. But that's boring to talk about. So, Holly, who do you think, if either of them are infected?
So, I believe that they are both infected.
Okay.
I think that, and I swear I keep forgetting his name. I'm sorry. Kurt Russell's character,
McCready.
McCready. I think he was infected long before,
Interesting.
and he has been tricking everyone this entire time. Because there is a theory that the infection is passed through the dog's saliva.
Right.
Because the dog runs up and licks it's Blair right at the beginning,
Yes.
and then
I think
after
so.
that he takes a drink of the water bottle and passes it to McCready.
Okay, and I can see where this is going.
And so he's been infected the entire time, and that wasn't actually his blood sample that he tested.
Huh. All right. I like that theory.
And Childs is definitely infected at the end, in my opinion.
Okay. I mean, I think that is the easier implication to make.
Well, it also barely looks like he is breathing at the end. But a counter argument with McCready breathing very heavily, I think he's trying to almost oversell it.
Right. Fair enough.
So I think they're both in for a surprise.
Al, how about you? Who do you think is infected, if either of them?
I actually think neither.
Okay.
Just because I think that would be the more dramatic outcome.
Uh-huh.
Is like they could have trusted each other and tried to get through somehow. But instead, this distrust of I'm not like letting you out of my sight is death for both of them.
Yep. And they were not arguably they're the two characters throughout the course of the film who I think trust each other the least.
Mm.
Like they're very
They go toe to toe a couple times.
yeah, once the shit hits the fan, they are arguably the most hostile to each other, particularly in the blood test scene. So I can see that. For my money, I am going to say I think one of them is infected. I go back and forth, and there are theories and there are tons of explanations about both of them. The one that I think I like the most, I tend to lead towards the notion that McCready is uninfected and Childs is infected. This is the bit that I like the most in terms of like the hints and stuff because it's so subtle. In other words, it's somebody making something up that almost certainly wasn't the case. So as they're preparing to fight the thing, they're putting together all of this explosive stuff. They are making the Molotov cocktails. At the end of the film, McCready comes out. He has this bottle, which we've been seeing him drinking throughout the entire film. But notably, after they make the Molotovs, we never see him drink. He comes out with this bottle. He doesn't drink it. Childs shows up. They sit down. The raging alcoholic passes the bottle over to Childs without drinking it himself. Childs does drink it, which would prove to McCready that definitely the thing because the thing wouldn't know the difference. That's where my theory lies.
See, I'm not 100% on that because I think in the tape recorder scene, there's that almost a bit of hesitation before he drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I could see that as I can't afford to be drunk right now.
Oh, for sure. But that is, I mean, that's before the Molotov stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of the end scene, my interpretation is he has that thing, he has the Molotov with him as a just in case, like, oh look, here's a last weapon I found just in case there's another one out there. And at that point, I think he's killed the thing, so, or at least the thing that he knows of. So if it was booze, why wouldn't he drink it? Like he knows he's not getting out anyways at that point. There's no escape. The only reason he wouldn't drink is if he doesn't want to drink kerosene.
He's just still unsure.
Maybe.
It's more of that I can't afford it.
I don't know that he cares at that point, other than he has to make sure that that it can't get out on its own.
But this is what discussion is about, is
Yep,
presenting different viewpoints.
absolutely. And ultimately, beyond the fact that thematically it doesn't matter, I don't think it narratively it matters either, because if neither of them infected, they're both dead. Like obviously comic books disagree with that notion because we have had sequels that played out in, I think it's Dark Horse, but for the purposes of the film, they're fucked.
I'm not 100% on Fahrenheit, but apparently negative 100 is not good.
No, generally it is not good to the human body.
Yeah, that was the weather they were dealing with. It's 100 below.
Yep. Yeah, I do love the ending though. I think it is. I get it. People don't like ambiguous endings. People don't like bleak endings. I love them. I think if you're gonna go there, go there. I like my happy endings too, but I think it's kind of a perfect ending for the film. Moving on from that and talking about beyond the film itself. Elle, I know you said you learned about this through cultural osmosis. Obviously, this film has had a great influence, a pretty significant legacy. It's referenced all over the place in pop culture. What have you experienced in terms of that kind of stuff outside of just the film and potentially having heard of the prequel or anything?
I mean, I'd never heard of the prequel until this episode.
Fair.
I can't recall if I've heard of anything specific about it other than that it is a movie that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I do have the expansion pack for the Final Girl board game,
Right.
which deals with the killer of the organism and Station 2891, because you can play either both in the same location or like with the killer in mix it up
Mm-hmm.
amongst the sets. And
Nice.
looking at it now, it's like, yeah, I get a lot more of the references that they're doing, because
Legit.
the station map is an exact like replica of the sets.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has McCready's little hut, it has the tool shed, it has the layout of the base, and the killer side of it for the organism. You resolve it by doing blood tests with them, and there is always one infected and up to three infected people on the board at any time. You have one that is representing the dog creature, where it is lower health but panics people all the time, which makes them run around the map randomly.
Mm-hmm.
And then it speeds up. Like it gets to do two movements after events in the game. You have one that is more aggressive, that it starts being able to kill rather than the others that have to build up, and
Right.
that's the two-headed one. And then you have the one with the big stretched head, which all it does is heal repeatedly. So
Okay.
it's very thematic in how it represents the movie, I feel.
Nice. Very cool. Holly, is there anything with this film that you see its legacy, see its influence, things that you recognize now that it would, other than you being traumatized?
I think the problem is if I have seen it in pop culture, like I didn't realize that's what it was.
That's fair.
Because again, I really think I blocked this from my memory for a very long time.
We're happy to have reopened your trauma.
Because I knew I had watched it, but I couldn't remember anything.
Right. No, that's absolutely fair. There are definitely some things. I mean, I think for me, we can talk about the prequel, the video games, all that stuff. I've kind of touched on those. The one I think that most obviously comes to mind outside of other films is a game that called this a pandemic movie that became very popular during that time in Among Us. Among Us is the lo-fi version of The Thing, the video game. There actually is a video game of the thing, like an officially licensed one. That is a single player, like story campaign type thing. I haven't played it. I can't imagine it's quite as good as Among Us at capturing that theme of conjuring the paranoia and pitting people against each other. The one that I definitely recognized when I read the book for it that I haven't got the chance to play out is Dungeons and Dragons Icewind Dale Rise of the Frost Maid. There are some very, very overt thing references in there that I think are very clever in how they play in and is something that I definitely want to run at some point because I think I always like a little horror in my D&D.
As do I.
Would you prefer to play it though? Like knowing that you have this experience with horror and the thing specifically, do you think you could be a better player than a DM for it?
Maybe that's actually a good question.
Because it's like, personally, I know you're a great DM.
I mean, thank you.
I have not had the opportunity.
One of these days.
I'm assuming you're a good DM, but who knows?
I mean, I always feel like I'm barely holding it together, but I think every DM feels like that.
Yeah.
But listen, if I have the opportunity to play something, I'm always going to default to I want to play because I have 9 gajillion character concepts inside of my head and I want to explore as many of them as possible. But I also think Rise of the Frostmane is a very well constructed 5th edition campaign. I think it's one that would be a lot of fun in either direction. So that's the thing. Final thoughts on the film. Elle, where does this movie ultimately land for you?
I feel that it is a product of its time, not
Hmm.
in the effects, but just the filming techniques and like just the framing of things.
Right.
It does things that I don't think would ultimately fly in cinema today, even in like the fringes as horror tends to be. So I think
Okay.
for me it is 3 severed dog heads out of 5.
Okay. Holly, how about you?
So it is a great movie. I probably will not be revisiting it ever again.
That is fair.
And that is purely because of my history with it. If I did not have that history with it, then things may be different. But that's where I am.
Totally legit.
And I'm going to give it 3.5 traumatic childhood nightmare dogs out of 5.
Fair. So I'll be honest, this is one of my absolute favorite sci-fi horror movies. For what it's trying to do, it is pretty perfect as far as I'm concerned. I don't rewatch it often, but like this watch, I went in trying to be critical and I couldn't find I definitely see the things and I definitely see the things, you know what I mean, that didn't work for both of you and why. But for me, this is about as close to perfect sci-fi horror gets. So this is 5 frozen scientists, or are they, out of 5. So yeah, that is the thing. As to what we'll be covering next episode, we are going to be going into, God, I don't even know how to describe this without spoiling stuff.
Something a bit more modern.
Yeah, something a little bit more modern, something a little bit more on the medical horror side, but also supernatural-ish, maybe, in The Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's a lot of fun. I will put it that way, or at least it is for me. But yeah, that will be next episode. If you want to find us, you can find us at whatever podcatcher you prefer. We are also on Blue Sky and Instagram at Final Ghouls Pod. You can find me at J Thomas for Romania on Blue Sky and Letterboxd.
I can be found at shards@kind.social on Mastodon and Shard System on Letterboxd.
You can find me at Hollycock on Blue Sky or at Miniature Magic 18 on Instagram.
And you can find us all playing role-playing games at Final Show Films on Twitch and YouTube. And Elle, give us our horror book survival guide tip.
Your DMs were right. Never split the party. But for the love of God, turn on the lights.